You're listening to Radio Kidnappers, the voice of Hawke's Bay. This is a program called
The Wonderful World of Wardini Books.
And as always, it's my pleasure to have in the studio the wonderful Lou from Wardini Books in Havelock North. How you been going, all right?
Yeah, really well.
And I suppose it's coming up to your season.
Yeah,
You've heard that?
Yeah. People are starting to think about Christmas presents already, and they have been for a bit. And I think current climate enables that too, or makes people think about it just in case.
Yes, and I'm surprised in a way, although I have just bought a book from you today, I'm surprised that still the amount of people out there who love to have a book that they can hold in their hand in this technical world where you can just go onto the internet and read a whole book if you want. But there's something about a book in your hand, isn't there?
Are you surprised?
Yeah, well, I sort of am, but yeah, I suppose maybe I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think, what I've just been doing with this one, and you can self-consciously be a book sniffer, but I'm not.
Yeah.
His
books have a smell.
Smells amazing.
Absolutely.
And also this one that we'll talk about in a minute has a certain feel because it's a hardback book. It's a physical thing, and I think people need to be able to connect to physical things.
And it's a different smell, because I've been into your shop a few times, it's a different smell in your shop to that of a second-hand bookstore.
Oh, yeah. Well, can you imagine the amount of people that have picked up those books as well, and the amount of food that's on them?
I know, but it's a sort of a smell which is sort of almost comforting in a way.
Oh, yeah. And we get, it gets a bit dusty sometimes in the air, and it's book dust and it's cardboard box dust, from when we've opened things, and it's quite wholesome.
It is. We digress for being a bit too sentimental because it's all about emotions today, isn't it?
It is all about emotions.
We've got 3 fabulous books to talk about, and the first book you're going to mention is No One is Angry Today.
Yeah, a book ostensibly for children. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful picture book. The illustrations are incredible. They're just comforting and warm and lovely. But the subject matter is philosophical. So the author is Toon Tellegen, and Marc Boutavant is the illustrator, and I think it's translated from the Dutch. So it really is all about emotions, and it's a series of short stories about a group of characters in the forest. So the first one is the Firebelly Toad and the Hedgehog, and I thought, these look like sweet stories, and I began to read this one. Beautiful little hedgehog in his gorgeous little wooden home, and it's all cosy and lovely, and the Firebelly Toad rocks up. Do you know what he does? You don't, do you, Kim?
No,
you would never imagine.
He eats the hedgehog.
He doesn't, but what he does is he pulls out all his quills.
Oh, my
That's actually
God, that'd be awful.
It's a violent start, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So he pulls out all his quills, and the hedgehog is sobbing, and the Firebelly Toad says, "What do you call what you are now, hedgehog?" And he says, "Angry, very angry." And he says, "You're not angry. No, you're not angry." And then the Firebelly Toad continues to go around other forest creatures and be really, really mean to them. And they all get together later and they're like, what is going on? And Firebelly Toad, there he stands in the meadow and he's going, no one is angry today. He can't get them to be as angry as he wants them to be. They're not as angry as him.
He has issues.
What is going on there?
Yeah, I don't know. Something's happened to him.
Yeah.
And he's taking it out on everyone else.
Yeah.
What is it?
And these are the questions I think that this book is intended to draw out of young people. So that the forest animals are all sitting around and they're going, well, he did this to me, and he's pulled the snail's feelers and he's done all these horrible things and he's so angry. And they start having these interesting discussions about, well, we're all angry, but are we? We're not as angry as he is. What's going on with him? Is it all relative? Perhaps what we're feeling is what he feels like when he's happy. So there's all these quite deep issues and philosophies coming through, and that's just the first story. And then there are a series of other stories. There is quite a gorgeous one about sadness, and that's the squirrel and the ant. And the squirrel is sitting in his beautiful little wooden house on a tree branch, because that's where squirrels live. Yes. And squirrel's friend ant has gone away, and it just says he thought about the ant and the distance and almost and never. I'm very sad, he thought, definitely. And he's identified that he is sad. And I think from that, Ant had said that she was going on a journey and might never return. So it's either about Ant just going off on a journey, or it could be an allegory for death, I suppose, if you wanted to look into it as deeply as I clearly have looked into it.
Yeah, obviously have looked into it, yes.
But the house reflects the sadness of Squirrel as well. And the house gets sad, and then a flip side of sadness is anger. Well, why has Ant gone away?
Yeah.
I miss Ant, and I wanted to come back. So exploring all these emotions, I think, is really important for kids and possibly grown-ups, because when I've been thinking about this rather too much this morning, but you know how people are quite angry at the moment about all
Very
sorts
much
of
so,
things, and
yes.
our society feels a little bit divided depending on where you're getting your information from. Perhaps we all just need to take a little step back and get some perspective and,
Yes, we do.
and talk about it a bit more.
Although I am depressed already and about this book, and you've only turned 2 pages, and I wonder, is it actually a children's book, or is it perhaps a book for adults with cartoons in it?
That's an interesting question. I think many books that are great for kids are also great for grown-ups. And, you know, C.S. Lewis said it is a great quote that I won't mangle right now. But I agree with him that they're thought-provoking for grown-ups. And I think if you read a story like this to children, never underestimate a 4-year-old, because
Sure.
they will just come out with something and you'll go, wow, okay. And you've forgotten how to think like that because you've been institutionalised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, inflicting pain on the poor old hedgehog. Imagine how painful that would be to have all of your quills pulled out and then to get hold of the old snail and, you know, pull his feelers.
Ken, to make you feel better, I'm going to find the picture where they're all fixing each other. And there's a rather gorgeous picture, and it's the grasshopper, I think, is putting the quills back in to the hedgehog one by one.
Oh, very good.
And they're all sitting there going, what is going on with that angry toad? Yeah.
And does it have a bit of light at the end of the tunnel? Do they find out what is wrong with the toad?
No.
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 Just goes off on his own.
But that would be that would be a conversation to have with children, wouldn't it? Like,
Yeah,
what is
absolutely.
because what if he's a refugee? What if he's being bullied? What
Yeah, of
if
course.
you know? All
So
of
many
those
side
things.
stories in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put that on my list. No.
It's not a Ken book.
And the next one is it's called A Rabbit Soldier Angel Thief. What a great title.
Isn't it? And this is quite a pretty cover, but it's the advanced reading copy, so it's not the actual cover. The actual cover, it's this size, it's a hardback, and it's got the most beautiful picture of a little boy on the front. It's by Katrina Nannerstadt, and it's can't remember who the publisher is now, but Harper Collins. So in this one, there's a little boy, and his name is Sasha. And he lives in Russia. He lives in a pretty village where the houses are wooden and the meadows are full of beautiful flowers. And he's got a cat, and it's all, you know, life's good. Dad's had to go away with the Red Army, though, because it's the Second World War. So they're fighting the Germans. That's what the stage of the war that they're at. Dad's not coming back. He knows that Dad's perished. The Germans are coming. The Germans come through and they burn the villages. And Little Rabbit, as he is called by his mother, is told to run, because his family are under attack, and he runs, and he knows what's happened the next morning when he wakes up after hiding out in the forest. He's 6 years old at this stage. He wakes up and he sees the smoke, and he smells the smoke, and he knows what's happened, and he knows he won't see his mum and his sister again. So he stumbles through the woods for a few days, and eventually comes across a faction of the Red Army. You know, when you think Red Army, you get a bit scared, don't you? You
yes,
think,
you
oh,
do.
brutal and all that kind of thing. But this is a different perspective, because these are still human beings, and Sasha is a Russian little boy, and they take him in and they look after him. And he is such, even after all his trauma and his tears, he is a very kind little boy and a loving little boy. And he wins them all over, and they become his family. So he wins over the cook, this grumpy Boris, who he feels like he's never going to win over. You know, get out of my hair, kid. You know, that kind of guy. The guy in charge is just lovely and becomes like another father to him eventually. But they sew him a little Red Army uniform, and he hangs out with them, and they look after him. And then later on, the angel part of it, hang on, rewind, Louise. It starts with Sasha as a 10-year-old, and he's in hospital in Berlin, and he's mute. He can't speak, and he's been stealing things from the other patients and hiding them under his bed. But there's a doctor there who just knows that that's for a reason. And eventually, she gets him to bring out certain things from under the bed, and those things trigger his memories, and he tells the story, you know, and there's all the patients like gathering around to hear this story. And it takes him eventually to Stalingrad, so he's with the Red Army, and he goes to Stalingrad, and they're driving the Germans out. And It's based on a real little boy called Sergei, who was known as the Angel of Stalingrad, because he was the one that was going around pulling people out of the rubble and giving love and hugs where that kind of thing didn't happen. So I won't tell you all of the story, but those are the different factions of the different parts of the story, is that he is Little Rabbit, he's a soldier, he's an angel, and he's a little thief.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just beautiful. So it's aimed at kids of probably about 9 and up, because it's got all this history in it and all this love and all this horrible things that humans do to each other. But then you've got this kid that's giving them all a bit of perspective as well.
Bit of hope.
Bit of hope.
Yes. Is it a book that's been around for a while? Because it sort of sounds to me like in my head that I've heard this story before, or has it been a movie, or is it a new book? Or what?
It's a new book.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, and sounds like a good story.
I loved it. She's
Light
a
at the end of
great
the tunnel.
writer. Yeah, yeah.
How many do you give it out of 10?
Oh, it's 10 out of 10
10
for
out of
this,
10.
you know.
Yeah.
If you can, you know, it's obviously not all hoppity-skippity.
No.
But I think it's for kids that like those war books, because a lot of kids do, and they want to read things that are sad because they're trying to process what emotions are like.
Yeah.
And to do it in a book, you're doing it safely.
And again, one of those crossover books, adults or kids.
I would say so, yeah.
Beautiful. And the next book is, I was going to say maybe a bit more up my alley, but it's a horror movie. I don't know so much at the moment.
Yeah.
It's called Reprieve. Tell us about it.
It's called Reprieve. And can you imagine, I've got a paperback book here. I didn't bring it with me today. It's fluorescent green, and it's got pink writing on the front, and it's by James Han Matson. It's a novel. It's a horror novel. And there's an envelope on the front with blood splatters all over it. So you're like, woo! It's set, so there's an idea that there is a haunted horror house attraction, like where people go to be scared, and it's called Quigley House, and it's in Nebraska. And it's run by a strange old man called John Forrester. And he's got all these actors that are in 6 cells in the basement, and you have to go on this sort of mission to get through the cells. And if you get to the final cell, you meet the ghost of Martha Quigley. And if you can kind of beat the ghost of Martha Quigley, and you've gathered all these envelopes as you go through, which is why the envelope's on the cover, then you can win a cash prize, you know, and it's all going to be fun. The big twist with this one is that, unlike our scary maze that we used to have out in the fields just near the prison here in Hawke's Bay, these actors can touch you. So they can push you, and they, in the dark, they can, you know, interfere with you so that you, to try and they're gushing blood, and, you know, they're all dressed up as as monsters, and you get covered in this fake blood. And so this is all going on, and then we know at the beginning of the book that a group has gone through and they're going to win the big prize, you know, but towards the end there's an actual murder. Someone actually dies in there. And so that's the mystery. So we know that has happened, and then we go back to the beginning, and there's this girl called Kendra, and she lives in Washington, and she's got an okay life, and she's a teenager, she's just entering her first close relationship with this lad that she likes, and they're horror fans. But she has to move out to Nebraska, and the boyfriend, Sean, says, oh my God, you're going to be near Quigley House, you know, get in there, try and get a job there. And she's too young to be an actor, so she goes and works in the car park. And eventually she persuades her cousin Brian to come in and be part of the team that goes through on this fateful night. And what's going on with John Forrester as well? He seems to be manipulating people. So there's you know, there's all this mystery and what's actually gone on, because, of course, when the person is murdered, everyone thinks it's part of the horror thing. So nobody does anything. Nobody tries to help. So it's like, what the hell is going on there? But it's so much fun. It's an absolute page turner. It's really well written. It's not kind of like, how do I put this without sounding really snobby? It's not just a wham bam. It's kind of beautifully written. Yeah. So highly recommend for anyone with a strong stomach.
Can't wait for the movie. And it's the funny thing is that I don't mind reading horror books like you've just described.
Oh, really?
Whereas that book about the little boy in the war, you know, because it really happened.
Yeah. And it's so sad.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Now, if we want any of these fabulous books, where do we get them?
Wardini books, please. I'll give you a sad book, don't worry.
You'll make them cry.
Yeah.
Good on you, Lou. Talk to you next week.
Cool. Cheers, Ken.